Video game sales are shrinking. At least that is what a consumer report by Circana seems to point to. And while I do believe the cost of living crisis is the biggest pressing issue for most of us, game companies rush to market with incomplete products that lack appeal to most. They are hurting by the lack of investment, and while I hold no sympathy to our corporate overlords, I see the repercussions on the regular consumer like me, who just wants to spend their hard-earned money on games that are fun and respectful of their time. At the same time, the collapse of video game journalism has never been most noticeable. From the insane amount of ads needed to keep the business running, to AI trying to pass as real people, the struggle is there. How are players supposed to inform themselves of over the 20,000 releases on Steam each year? In systems where clicks are the incentive, it seems that smaller, more experimental games will always be at a disadvantage. I believe this is where a dedicated movement of curators could come in. It is now a revolutionary system, as we have examples of it for over 100 years. Could this be a way for us to spend more meaningful hours with our favorite hobby? But what are the barriers that stand against curators? What changes could platforms adopt to have a more comprehensive system? It is impossible for a review to be unbiased, and it shouldn't be. Reviews are important in the context by who and when they were written. In video games, they may even become outdated if the game happens to be updated. Then why do we put so much weight on the words of a reviewer? Because there is just so much information we can glean for ourselves. Sure, we have trailers with pretty cinematics, but how does the gameplay from moment to moment feel? Ideally, most video games will have demos. Steam Next Fest has been incredible at this, but demos are still vertical slices that are part of the game's marketing. We need reviewers to take their experience in playing video games to inform us if the product sold is actually worth its price. It is a quid pro quo. We give them money, mostly in the form of viewing ads, and their job is to accurately inform us of the state of the game. In the current landscape, it is often difficult to discern the difference between a review of a product and a spotlight. While the biggest media outlets and YouTube personalities are US-centric, and therefore should adhere to the FTC laws on disclosure, it is insanely difficult to tell if a viewer's opinion has been influenced by a relationship with the publisher and developer. Some creators don't completely grasp the importance of being transparent with their audiences, since we are placing our trust on their words that will inform our own purchasing decisions. While the job of a curator and the reviewer are not exclusive from each other, I do believe the first is centered in building trust with its audience to be able to recommend video games. A curator needs rapport, and they need to establish firmly what their tastes and dislikes are. What are their parameters for recommending games? If you're watching this video, you're probably a video game enthusiast, someone who plays more than the median of 4 yearly games reported by Steam. You're probably well informed, know the biggest releases, and tune into the biggest broadcasts whenever you can. And there is a very good chance you watch some gaming content creators, and have a pretty good idea on their taste in video games. I know this because this is me in a nutshell. Nowadays, you will find a plethora of personalities, both big and small, which will give you recommendations on almost anything. Unless they're using AI, recommendations are given by people, and we can find curators of every size, from more personal curators to even corporate ones. I am speaking mostly from the point of view of YouTube, since it is the platform that I use the most, and therefore the one I am most familiar with. Mortism Gaming is one of the channels I regularly follow. They cover a lot of RPGs, and I think it's fair to say that CRPGs are their bread and butter. So, I get a lot of my CRPG news and reviews from them. I would say they are a niche curator who is really good at their job. He really doesn't need my endorsement, but if you haven't heard of him, I would highly recommend you check him out. They are a perfect example of a personal curator. You can look at their backlog of videos and get a pretty good impression of where their expertise is and how that impacts their recommendations. Corporate curators can happen when the organization has a clear messaging on what they are recommending. One of my favorites is the Co-op Bros. They focus on fun, cooperative games and usually highlight the upcoming releases that cater to this genre. They're a small organization, but even if they were to add a couple more people to their team, I think they are committed to recommending the best out there in the co-op gaming space. Outlets that are larger, unless they continue to demonstrate they have a specific mission, fail to in being effective curators. Let's take IGN for example. The people doing the work are talented, but everything they do falls under the IGN umbrella. You don't really get to know them past seeing their name in the byline. I believe this is done on purpose, as the outlets have let talent continuously throughout the years. I personally follow the work of Mitchell Salzman, and I have managed to gauge how much of his video game taste is similar to mine. It takes a lot of work and time to find curators and find how their opinion relates to your own taste. These barriers are somewhat exacerbated depending on which platforms you buy games. One of the main inspirations for this was the Steam curator system that they first established in 2014. This was an attempt by Valve to facilitate personalities or corporations to present opinions on games when you were deciding if you were going to make a purchase. It seems that Valve had some very hefty expectations for the features that didn't pan out, and is still available to this day. In essence, the curator has a couple of sentences to mark their opinion on the game, and it will be a feature on the Steam page if the player happens to follow the curator. Nowadays, there is rampant evidence that the system is currently being abused, as you can create a curator page just to receive free keys from developers, usually on the indie side. It seems that Valve has begun cracking down on these practices, but they also have not given the feature enough support to be a meaningful part of the shopping experience. And why would they? There doesn't seem to be evidence to support the fact that the curator system incentivizes new sales. Still, Steam is the only page which features a system such as this, as the console competitors lag severely behind on what the team at Valve has been able to offer on the PC side. The PlayStation Network Store and the Nintendo eShop, the two other shops which I have experience with, are pretty basic when it comes to their shopping experience. None of them feature reviews for any games, and the rating system is measly. It seems the expectation is that you are gathering information about the game outside of the store, as even the UI is not friendly for knowledge gathering, and they have no incentive to change their ways, even though they are charging the same 30% commission as Steam. The monopoly on their own platform means negligible improvements on the user experience. Will making the shopping experience lead to more sales? I believe so. This is merely anecdotal, but I have been several times where I have found a game by browsing and I didn't complete my purchase because I had to look for information online. Maybe if I were able to check that on the store, particularly on the current state of the game, I would be more inclined to actually spend my money. An example which comes to mind is Anthem. Before the announcement of the shutdown, I had interest in buying it on sale just to check it out, but its broken reputation never really recovered, as I didn't even know if the game was in a playable state. Did it cost me something to do a quick search? No, but since it wasn't a priority, I didn't do it, and now my chance is gone. The evidence seems to point that Nintendo has a somewhat negative view on content creators. Even as they have some of the most devoted fans, the company is famous for not having the best practices with influencers, issuing copyright strikes and even taking some of them to court. They have no incentive to create a curator system, even though the value is visible. Sony and PlayStation are no different, even if, in the limelight, they have a more positive relationship, as to not be widely known to issue copyright strikes. Their hegemony as a console leaders had led them to be hostile with their own player base, increasing the price of their online subscription and even toying with dynamic pricing. Unlike the consoles, which are closed gardens, the PC marketplace has multiple offerings. One of the reasons Valve and Steam have remained at the top is because the experience of buying video games is the best out there. You have the review summary, the actual user reviews, and even the forums. The communal experience of buying a game that has been played by thousands feels tangible. And knowing that a curator you follow recommended a game that you're interested in may lead you to actually buy a game you enjoy. But why does it have to be on the store? The social experience of buying games has declined as the increased volume in sales occur on these digital storefronts. It is easy to remember a time when we used to rent movies, and we could ask the clerk to use their knowledge to recommend something that we watch. If the platforms have undeniable benefit from this digital transition, I think this is a way for them to avoid feeling soulless and algorithmically driven. How can Steam encourage quality curation? The obvious answer would be monetary incentives. Amazon has a referral system for purchases, so maybe a similar method could be adopted for these gaming marketplaces. Could it be abused? Absolutely. But players aren't dumb. If you're willing to burn the trust you have with those who watch you for a quick paycheck, then your recommendations were probably never good to begin with. As for what way the curation would happen in the store, this is where I find it the most difficult to visualize. Sure, the current way is not bad. Honest curators can find a way to summarize their recommendations in a couple of sentences, but video remains king. However, the idea of video being hosted on the stores is not necessarily an attractive one. I honestly don't know about this, but at least I think that stripping some of the other video platform dominance over the space can lead to good things for competition. There is also the side of me that wonders if this is just a silly endeavor. When it comes down to it, I'm just advocating for another way for companies to sell us stuff. Curators only win notoriety when we buy stuff they recommend. However, it may be foolish of me to think. I think I'd rather have people sell me something instead of an experience solely driven by the algorithm. Maybe having a dedicated curator system can encourage people who are having trouble finding games, find the right games for them. I consider myself someone who has a wide range on the games I play, especially in comparison to other gamers in my circle. I know it sounds self-congratulatory, but I played the AAA action-adventure games to the visual novels reminiscent of the PC-98 days. As I approach my 30s, it has been a long and wonderful experience in getting to know what my taste in video games really is, and I know how long it took. Players experiencing fatigue from the constant barrage of live service games that don't amount to much could offload some of that cognitive load into people whose job is to look at the daily releases on Steam. There is an utopic ideal that the places where we shop our games could be enhanced by a dedicated, non-abuse system of curation that values the recommendation of people over the one by algorithms. I wonder where Valve is within this spectrum. They have the most community-forward platform, and it is clearly the gold standard for consumer friendliness, even as they still have their issues. Would they actually be interested in investing in their tools to have a more human approach, even if it means it wouldn't be as profitable as the algorithm-driven way?